Bruce Lee couldn't train. For a man who had built his entire life around movement, speed, and physical discipline, this wasn't just an injury, it was a nightmare. In 1970, a training session went terribly wrong. Bruce Lee severely injured his back. Doctors ordered him to stay in bed for months, and according to Bruce Lee's official biography, he was told he might never practice kung fu again. Think about that. A martial artist being told he might never return to martial arts. But what happened next is perhaps even more remarkable, because when Bruce Lee couldn't train his body, he started training his mind. And the ideas he developed during that period would become an important part of his legacy. Welcome back to LeeVerse. Today we're going back to one specific day in Bruce Lee's life, a day that stopped him physically, but didn't stop him mentally. This is the story of Bruce Lee's 1970 back injury. It's not a story about a miraculous overnight recovery, and it's not a story about ignoring medical advice. It's a story about patience, frustration, research, adaptation, and what Bruce Lee did when the thing he loved most was suddenly taken away from him. By 1970, Bruce Lee had developed an extraordinary commitment to physical training. His body wasn't simply part of his profession, it was his laboratory. He experimented with strength, speed, endurance, flexibility, coordination. He studied how the human body moved and how training could improve performance. His approach was intense, sometimes, perhaps, too intense. The official Bruce Lee biography describes his dedication to physical culture as a major part of his life, and says that this enthusiasm ultimately contributed to the injury that became a chronic source of pain. Bruce believed in pushing himself, but on one particular day, he pushed too far. The injury occurred in 1970 during weight training. Bruce was performing a movement commonly known as the good morning exercise. According to the official Bruce Lee biography, he lifted a 125-pound barbell without warming up, despite normally warming up before training. Something went wrong. His back was severely injured, and the consequences weren't temporary. Bruce was suddenly unable to train the way he had before. For someone whose daily routine revolved around physical movement, the change was devastating. Doctors ordered Bruce to remain on bed rest. The official Bruce Lee biography describes the following months as an extremely frustrating, painful, and depressing period for him. Imagine the psychological impact. Bruce Lee was known for movement. Now movement itself had become restricted. His normal training routine was gone. His ability to work physically was limited, and his future in martial arts suddenly looked uncertain. For months, Bruce had to wait, and waiting was something he wasn't particularly good at. The hardest part may not have been the physical pain, it was uncertainty. Would he recover? Would he be able to kick again? Would he be able to train? Would he be able to continue his career? Bruce Lee had spent years developing himself physically. Now his body was forcing him to stop. And he couldn't simply punch his way through the problem. He couldn't train harder. He couldn't ignore it. He had to adapt. And this is where the story changes. Bruce Lee couldn't train his body normally, so he turned his attention toward his mind. During his recovery, he spent extensive time reading and writing. The official Bruce Lee biography says this period became a time for him to redefine his goals, and that much of the writing preserved from him dates from this period. His interests went far beyond martial arts technique. He studied philosophy, psychology, movement, training, human behavior, and the principles behind combat. The body had been forced to slow down. The mind didn't have to. This period reveals something fascinating about Bruce Lee. He didn't see martial arts as simply physical. For him, understanding movement required understanding the person moving. Why do we react? Why do we hesitate? Why do we become rigid? Why do we fear failure? Why do we become attached to a particular technique? These questions became increasingly important to his thinking, and while he couldn't spend hours physically demonstrating his ideas, he could write them down. Bruce Lee accumulated an enormous amount of personal writing throughout his life. During his recovery, that intellectual work became especially important. His notes explored martial arts philosophy and the ideas behind Jeet Kune. Some of this material would eventually contribute to the posthumously published Tao of Jeet Kune. The book wasn't simply a collection of fighting techniques, it reflected Bruce Lee's broader thinking about martial arts, and much of the material was developed during a period when he was physically unable to train normally. That irony is extraordinary. The man famous for physical movement was creating some of his most enduring ideas while lying still. Eventually, Bruce began rebuilding his physical strength. The official Bruce Lee biography describes him gradually beginning to walk and then slowly building his strength. This wasn't an overnight comeback, it was gradual, step by step, movement by movement. He had to relearn patience. And for someone as intensely driven as Bruce, that may have been one of the hardest lessons of all. Bruce eventually returned to physical activity, but the injury didn't simply disappear. According to the official biography, the back injury became a chronic source of pain for the rest of his life. And yet, Bruce continued working. He continued developing his martial arts. He continued pursuing his film career. And within a relatively short time, his life would change dramatically. While Bruce was recovering, his career was also at a crossroads. Hollywood had not given him the opportunity he wanted. He was considering what to do next. Then came an important connection from Hong Kong. Producer Raymond Chow approached Bruce about making films for Golden Harvest. Bruce accepted. The opportunity eventually led to The Big Boss, and the rest became history. The official Bruce Lee biography specifically connects his recovery period with his decision to return to Hong Kong and pursue the film opportunity that followed. Think about the timing. Bruce had just experienced one of the most difficult periods of his life, and shortly afterward, his film career exploded. This is what makes the story so powerful. Bruce Lee's injury took away the thing he relied on most, physical action. But it forced him to develop something else, reflection, when he couldn't move. He studied. When he couldn't train normally, he wrote. When he couldn't simply push harder, he had to think differently. And that idea fits perfectly with the philosophy he would continue developing throughout his life. Adapt. It's tempting to tell this story as Bruce Lee was told he couldn't train, but through sheer willpower he proved everyone wrong. But that's too simple. The real story is more interesting. Bruce Lee had to rest, he had to recover, he had to be patient, and he used that time to rethink his goals and deepen his understanding of martial arts. The injury didn't magically make him stronger. It forced him to find a different way forward. And perhaps that's one of the most important lessons Bruce Lee ever demonstrated. Strength isn't always about pushing harder. Sometimes, strength is knowing when you have to stop, and then finding a new way to continue. In 1970, Bruce Lee's body told him to stop. For months, he couldn't do what he loved. But his story didn't end there. He came back. He returned to training. He returned to work. And soon, he would become one of the most recognizable martial artists in the world. The injury didn't define Bruce Lee, but what he did during that period helped reveal the person behind the legend. Thank you for watching LeeVerse. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more carefully researched episodes about the real events behind Bruce Lee's life, philosophy, films, and legacy. Until next time, don't just push forward, learn how to adapt.